from the app Orange Pill, author, all sorts of kinds of stuff. And we're gonna have a really interesting conversation because he's got a new book coming out on Saturday. Just found out, called Parallel. Is that correct, Brian?
That's correct. Yep.
It sounds great. Well, it's gonna be an interesting conversation because we've talked to a lot of Bitcoiners. We've talked to a lot of health experts and scientists in the field, but you sort of are mending those two sides. And I think it's really important. We're seeing that more and more, even in the Bitcoin space, of sort of like this idea of health is wealth and wealth is health in a lot of senses. And I think you've made a lot of really good posts about that on your feed on Twitter as well as Instagram. So just to sort of get us off to the races here, maybe you can sort of give us a little bit of background on yourself, kind of your Bitcoin journey, and also sort of that health melding, because I find the more people are in one space or the other, they sort of begin to blend the two. And I'd love to hear your version of that.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It's so common for this. And I think for me, when I had that realization, I'd kind of lived a generally healthy lifestyle, but probably like a fiat healthy lifestyle, right? Like I was active. I expended more calories than I took in, that type of thing. It wasn't the concept of clean food or cleanliness in my diet didn't really occur. Like, as long as I wasn't eating excessive amounts of fast food, I thought I was in the okay zone. Like, that was pretty much the limit of my understanding. And that was many years ago. But I think it was probably 2013 the first time I heard about Bitcoin, or maybe late 2012. And I heard about it on ESPN. It was just Saturday morning college football game day. The announcers were lined up on the sidelines, and they were just breaking down the game. And there was a kid in the background with the sign that said, "Hey mom, send Bitcoin." And he had a QR code on the sign. And I looked it up a couple of days later, and it turns out this kid, because I was just curious. I was like, "What is this? This looks really stupid. It looks like a bunch of like something that dorky college kids do." But I'm fascinated by that. I'm also kind of a nerd at heart too. And so I look it up, and this college guy had like $24,000 worth of Bitcoin sent to him from Bitcoiners all over the world. And this was 2013-ish, like this is probably 20 to 40 Bitcoin that was sent to this guy, just because Bitcoiners were so happy to see Bitcoin had finally made it to ESPN. And from there, I started to try and learn a little bit more about Bitcoin. I also had some friends that I trained jujitsu with at that time. They were a little bit older than me. They were kind of mentors of mine. I was an entrepreneur at that time, but these guys were 5 or 6 years ahead of me, and guys I really looked up to, and they had started to kind of dabble in Bitcoin. And I remember being really frustrated, actually, that they were buying Bitcoin. Like, these are guys I respected. These were guys that made wise, prudent decisions. And here they were buying this thing that this dorky kid on ESPN Saturday college game day like had a sign for, and it was like obviously a fad. I said all the things that everybody says about Bitcoin. It's a pyramid scheme. It's a Ponzi scheme. Guys, you're having the wool pulled over your head. Like, somebody's going to come and I didn't know the term rug pull at the time, but somebody's going to rug pull you guys. And that was what prompted me to start studying Bitcoin more in depth, and kind of money more generally, was this idea that I wanted to prove these guys wrong so that I could help my friends out, guys that I looked up to that I just felt were kind of off. And through that, because Bitcoin, it's true. It's true, sound money. And when you ask questions about something that's true, it's not going to break. Like, it's not going to waver when it's the right answer. And so if you're honest, you're going to essentially break, right? Your point of view is going to break, and you'll come to the truth. And so I think that's why there's such an overlap between the Bitcoin space and people that ask questions about health and wellness. Because my wife, during that same time, like, I'm the money side of our household, she's the health side of our household. She was asking all those same questions. And we realized a few years back, this is probably 6 or 7 years ago now, that all the Bitcoin podcast guys that I was listening to were starting to show up on the diet podcast that she was listening to. We're like, why are they cross-pollinating, right? Like, why are the meat guys on the Bitcoin podcast and the Bitcoin guys on the anti-pharma podcast and stuff like that? And so it was interesting that our two kind of passions, our two spheres of influence that we were gravitating towards independently, were overlapping. And it's because it's that same principle. if you start from first principles and you ask, is this true? Is this right? Is this rational? Then it sends you down that path. And when you ask what's in your money, you start to ask what's in your food. You start to ask what's in your medication. You start to ask what's in your, in the clothes that you wear. I mean, it's almost like frustrating because you have to start asking that question about every element of life. And you can become neurotic about it, or you can take a sensible approach and start to systematically maybe transform elements of your life. It's not something that you need to make yourself miserable by doing, but I think people should take an iterative process in kind of trending towards better sound thinking, better sound living.
I think that's a great overview. I mean, for me, it was like the same way. I got more into Bitcoin through my health journey. And for me, a big turning point was definitely, COVID, right? Like
Mm.
everything that happened during COVID and then the financial response to it, the, lockdowns, the pharmaceutical mandates, everything kind of reiterated that to a higher level for me. How was that journey for you? Because, now you're actively working in the Bitcoin space for Orange Girl app. You've written a book. You have a health and wellness centers. You've written this other book. For me, COVID was also an inspiration to go and write my book, and then now, ultimately work in this space kind of full time. So, was that a moment for you that really was massive?
Yeah, huge. And that was cool because that was actually how you and I met. Tristan was out at the Georgia Beef Initiative, and we had our table set up with our books, and we were both kind of sharing about, what prompted you to write your book. You're like, yeah, COVID's just getting people to ask so many questions of me, and I felt like I just had to write it down. And we both had Bitcoin books, but we both had you were already ahead of the game with, like, you were relating it to food, and I was kind of taking here's kind of a beginner's guide for Bitcoin, kind of more of a general overview. But I remember I bought a few copies from you, and my friends and family loved your take on it. And I think that was awesome because you're right that COVID was such a time for everybody asking the right questions. Now, I was fortunate enough, in our it's my wellness centers. It's actually I'm in the back office of one right now. It's called Salt and Light Wellness. We just have a few locations in Southern California. We started the license recently, so we have a bunch of licensees ramping up to start to open their own locations and stuff. But we do light-based therapy. So we've done, we do sunbeds, we do red light therapy. Basically, if you've listened to like a Joe Rogan episode, we've been doing that stuff since 2008. So we do cold plunge, we do salt rooms, we do, like I said, infrared saunas and those types of things. So light has all sorts of really beneficial effects on our bodies. And it's kind of crazy because and we're huge advocates for getting outside. Like the services that we do, you can get them for free outside. Like there's infrared light and sunshine, like early in the morning and late at night. Like you can get exposure to infrared light. Obviously, UVB, which is stimulating your vitamin D, and UVA, which stimulates nitric oxide, which is good for your heart. Like all these things come from natural light. Unfortunately, the lifestyle that we live, especially here in California, is such a fast-paced lifestyle. When these people we our customers have all of this stuff at their disposal, but they work indoors all day. And so really their options are they can either try to take an oral supplement, which isn't necessarily a very efficient way to get it, or kind of the second best way to get it is through simulated light. And so that's what we provide to our customers. But we're closed on Sundays, and our big thing is we're always like, man, Sunday is your day to get outside. Like we understand that this is not in our best interest to tell our customers that they can get our services for free, but that day that you have off, like do whatever you can to touch some grass, get out to the beach, get out into the mountains, go for a hike, get natural. Like we just want to be a supplement. We want to be your secondary option for the healthy choices that you can make in other elements of your life. Like we always defer to natural is the best option, and what is the second best option. And that's kind of, we've always wanted, been willing to play second fiddle to God's great mother nature creation of the things that he's provided with us. So anyways, we've been in that game for a long time. Like I said, since 2008. Our business boomed with COVID because so many people were starting to ask these questions, like, how do I people, I think, started to become amazed at how the body has its ability to cure itself. One of the analogies I always use is, I remember after one of the Avengers movies, it was like I think it was like the first Infinity War movie. Tony Stark's suit, like that I remember listening to somebody talk about it. They're like, Tony Stark's his suit, he can like heal himself now. This is too ridiculous. Like this is too science fiction-y. Tony Stark's suit can heal itself. And I'm like, that's funny because that's exactly what the body does. Like when the body's damaged or when we're wounded or when we're sick or whatever it happens to be, our body, albeit perhaps a little bit slower, has this miraculous ability to heal itself. The problem is we've gotten away from thinking our body heals itself because all the things we do it are inhibiting that healing process. And so we need to go to external sources. We need to get that back surgery. I mean, I can't tell you how many guys from jiu-jitsu I've seen go get a back surgery only to be made far worse, right? Rather than like their doctor just finding ways for their body to heal itself naturally, they start cutting and dicing into these guys' backs or their knees or whatever it happens to be, and they're inhibiting their own process. It's like the thing I say is like, imagine I got a wound on my arm and I keep sticking my finger in the wound. Like I can't imagine that thing's ever going to heal. I need to get myself out of the way so that my body can heal itself naturally. And I think that's the realization that people have really made after COVID is like, man, synthetic everything is not the answer for the way my body wants to heal and restore itself. And when people get a little taste of that, I think they want more of it. I think that's a lot of what I've heard you talk about, Tristan, is that you start to see a little bit of that natural benefit, and you want more of it. You want to embrace that with more of your lifestyle.
Yeah, it's almost like a positive feedback loop, right? And I think, well, you just outlined it so perfectly, right? Like nature is the ultimate source. You're just trying to help supplement for the unnatural living situation we're in with, indoor work and indoor living. And I think that's really important because a lot of people don't realize that, and that health is not something you have to pay for. But, if you have the means, you can, kind of have these workarounds, but they're always secondary to what's free and accessible to us all in nature. So maybe talking about that a bit further, how do you think about that from like a self-sovereignty, individual sovereignty perspective? Because in the Bitcoiner space, like obviously they get it, financial freedom, everything. More and more people are starting to get about the health side of things, but how do you think about it? And how do you like maybe convince more Bitcoiners to really take self-sovereignty over their health?
I mean, that's really a lot of the crux of the book, Parallel, that I'm dropping this Saturday. Is this idea that the stronger you are, the less dependent you are on the system. If you're weak, like socialism, collectivism, whatever those isms are that we don't like, they all need you to be weak and reliable. And so when you're anti-fragile in your money, when you're anti-fragile in your health, when you're anti-fragile in being able to make free decisions in your lifestyle, that's not conducive with a collectivist system. The collectivist system needs you to be weak so that you're dependent on them. And so whether it's Bitcoiners or whether it's just like regular liberty loving people that haven't woken up to Bitcoin yet, I think they need to understand that. I know a lot of people, unfortunately, that are like, yes, I love freedom, but at the same time, they're very unhealthy in their lifestyle. And I'm like, you don't understand everything you're doing. Every time you go to the doctor and you get that prescription, or you like, I mean, I was raised when you had a cold, you went to the doctor, and it's like the doctor can't do anything for a cold. All those types of things they're votes for the existing system. So every time you can choose to not go to that doctor visit that's unnecessary, not take that prescription that you don't need, not buy that fiat food that is going to poison you and weaken you. Every single one of those things is like a lever pull in the ballot against the existing system for the new parallel system. And that's how we unwind fiat. That's how we unwind the power of the collectivists or the socialists, the communists, or whatever you want to call them, because their power is predicated on us needing them. If we no longer need them, then they're therefore powerless.
No, that's really, it's actually something came to mind when you were talking about that, and actually what you were saying earlier, before Tristan asked his question. And the way I thought of it was, when you look at fiat and you look at centralized medicine, I think of the word scarcity, or like scarcity mindset. And then when I think about Bitcoin and I think about this idea of decentralized medicine or decentralized health, decentralized finance, I think of abundance. And so it's sort of this abundance mindset versus the scarcity mindset. And if, I mean, all anyone has to do, and everyone that maybe isn't even into this could agree with this statement, that all you need to do is turn on the TV and watch the news, and you'll see that the world has built a scarcity mindset that they want you to live in. And that's sort of what I think keeps back, maybe on a higher level, what could be systemic change for the ideas that we talk about. And sort of my question to that would be, how do we bring this realm of thought into the new normalization? And I don't think it's something that can maybe happen. And we've asked like probably every guest this question, and it's sort of an open-ended one. But how would you approach that? I mean, obviously you're doing things every day, like writing this book, that I think are very beneficial for those that are curious, and that's the minds you want to tap. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on how we sort of make that a more normalized idea, this idea of abundance versus scarcity.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I think when you can live, I mean, so I'm an evangelical Christian, and so we always talk about this idea of being the light, right? And I think that we as freedom loving, liberty loving, decentralized people, the best way to evangelize what you believe is just by living it out. My wife and I, we have 4 kids, super healthy, very well adapted. We homeschool them all. And I remember as a public school kid being like, I'm never going to homeschool my kids because they're going to be social weirdos and stuff like that. And they're in jujitsu, they're into snowboarding, they're into pickleball, they're into dance, they're into the theater, they're into all sorts of different things. Like, they're so active. And people tell us all the time, like when we go out to restaurants, because we don't sit them in front of an iPad, like we see all the other kids in the restaurant doing that. We always have, there's always like an old person that comes up to us and is like, I just want to say your kids are so well behaved, right? And when you live a healthy, different lifestyle, it shows. Like, people notice. We've had so many of our friends in our friend circle, like in our just local community, that have changed kind of the way that they parent their kids because of the example they've seen from others, not just my family, but like others. There's other families in this community that are living this way. And so you don't even really have to be this giant advocate. You don't have to like knock on people's doors and be like, hey, you should live a decentralized, healthy lifestyle. If you're doing it right, people are going to notice. They're like, wow, there's something different about them. Like there's something that's just, it seems a little bit better. And they don't seem to panic when the scarcity stuff hits the fan. I mean, the best example ever of scarcity mindset was like the toilet paper famine during COVID, right? Like everybody was freaking out that there's not even enough toilet paper. And that's what happens when you have centrally planned everything, right? When there's 1 or 2 sources of the toilet paper you need, that's a huge problem, right? When it comes to health, when you start to show people that like, hey, I go outside and I try to get 30 minutes of sunshine every day. If I can go out and I can run around for like a couple hours, I'm going to do that, right? Like but at least I'm going to get at least a little bit of a minimum dose, because the best thing that I can do for my health is get some sunshine today. It's like literally this one, like we always talk about how there's no magic pill. Well, sunshine's like one of the things that's the closest thing to a magic pill, which is kind of amazing. That's decentralized. I don't need permission from anybody to go get sunshine, and I don't need like a prescription to get sunshine. You don't need you don't need any central authority. And so when people see that you're starting to get your health from these systems where you don't have to ask permission, I think it starts to unwind some of that thinking, and it shows them. It makes them maybe a little bit less anxious. They're like, oh wow, because what happened with COVID again? Like they always talked about the problem was going to be there's only so many hospitals and there's only so many hospital beds, and if we get too many people sick, we're not going to be able to treat anybody. That is the inherent flaw in centralized medicine. But when every mom has some home remedies and naturopathic things that she can do to treat her husband or to treat herself or to treat her children, then every house is essentially like a mini hospital, right? And you're able to take care of yourself in that setting. And so just living out that lifestyle of decentralized living, I think is one of the best things you can do. I mean, I've been inspired plenty of times by Tristan's post of like him getting out there and like just dunking in a river or going out and like doing a hike or something like that. These things speak to people, and whether they see that in a post or whether they see you doing that in real life, those are inspiring to other people. And it's like no words are said. Like Tristan doesn't have to say anything other than doing it, and it's having an impact on somebody else that's halfway across the country or halfway across the world. Certainly it's going to have that kind of impact on people in your community that see you in the flesh and blood.
Yeah, I mean, really, like nature, like you said, sunshine, nature, these are the ultimate decentralized systems. It's the ultimate source. Like, why don't we embrace that? Why have we not made that connection that when we have left this world and now we live in this artificial world, that our health has gone down the toilet? So is that the inspiration behind the book, to kind of like bring this to the attention of people who might care about this? Because I do see, people get it a little bit, like, yeah, outside makes me feel good, but they still don't really get it at a deeper level. And I think there's a lot left on the table. And that's obviously why I'm so passionate about education, because you kind of have to be very, very deliberate nowadays. And it really shouldn't be that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think that the concern is now I have a very optimistic view of the future. I think things are going to turn out great. But we need to have a pessimistic model like CBDCs. If these things get rolled out and they're everything that that could be wrong with money, right? Censorable, traceable. They can drain your bank account to help curb inflation or whatever they want to do, or you can have it tied to a social credit score or tied to AI that's constantly monitoring you. All these terrible things. That could be the most powerful tool of tyrants that human history has ever seen, right? If left unchecked, I mean, we're dealing with something that has massive potential to be a huge problem for people that love individualism and liberty. And so, even though right now we do have decentralized access to sunshine, or decentralized access to local meat producers or ranchers, or whatever I want to operate with, if CBDCs come online and we don't have a parallel system built, all those connections that I thought I had made, they might kind of be valueless. Like, right, if I don't have a connection with a rancher who accepts Bitcoin, then when CBDCs come live and I don't have any other option, like, it's going to be a big problem. Like, I might be in a position where I'm force fed to feed my kids bug protein because that's the only type of food that my money buys me. But right now, if we have a parallel system where ranchers are accepting Bitcoin, and the guy that fixes my computer accepts Bitcoin, and my plumber accepts Bitcoin, and all of a sudden I have this circular economy that I can find somebody to provide every good and service that my family might need to sustain itself, and they accept Bitcoin, I've now created the ultimate check on the CBDCs. And I think by the very existence of a Bitcoin parallel economy, I think it acts as a huge check in general on the CBDCs, to where they won't be as bad. Actually, that's why I have a positive view of the future. I think CBDCs and those who are running the CBDCs know that they can't make it as bad as they want to make it, because if they do, then people will just opt into Bitcoin. If Bitcoin is a viable option, that will be, an egregious CBDC will just force people to go over to Bitcoin. Now, every time a currency collapses, and this is one of the things we cover in the book, there's a perfect storm of perfect storms. There's actually 4 perfect storms that are happening right now. And if you guys aren't familiar with, in the audience, if you're not familiar with a perfect storm is a storm that has like 3 or 4 mini storms inside of it, like 3 or 4 mini storms coming together to make this ultra powerful storm. Well, what we're seeing is a perfect storm of 4 perfect storms. So it's literally like 12 storms coming together. There's Ray Dalio's 3 cycles, the financial, political, and technological cycles that are all coalescing. And if you guys haven't read that, I break it down in the book, so it's very easy to understand. We're seeing 3 things present that every time a paradigm shifts, you need to have these three things present. It's a will for change, a social layer to connect people that want change, and then a technological advancement that brings change. So obviously that perfect storm is happening as well. The fourth turning, for anybody who's familiar with the book, The Fourth Turning, we're in that fourth turning episode where society goes to where society breaks down. When society breaks down, it then re-centralizes. We're hitting that. And then we're also seeing the end of the fiat currency cycles. Fiat currencies typically only last as long as about 48 years. We're about 51, 52 years into the fiat versions of the Great British Pound, the Japanese yuan, and the US dollar. So all of our world's most major fiat currencies are at the end of their life cycle. All of these things are happening all at one time. If you look back to history, with like the fall of the Soviet Union or the fall of the Roman Empire or any major superpower that's ever collapsed, after they collapse, there's always a parallel economy that emerges for a period of time. It doesn't last that long though, but it's kind of what people need to do. The currency has collapsed, the empire has collapsed, and so society goes decentralized for a little bit of time, and then after about 20, 30 years, the state grows back in power, and then they absolve the parallel system. So the parallel system only exists for a little bit of time, and then it goes away. Because those parallel systems always developed in response to the collapse. This is what's unique about the parallel system that's being built right now. We have a 15-year head start. The Bitcoin parallel economy has been building for 15 years at least before the collapse of empire happens. And so I think that that's why our shot in this generation is a unique chance for that parallel system, not only to last for a generation, but to be a sustainable parallel system for generations to come, because it's being built before the collapse of the major empires of the world. And so it's going to exist not only before, but also globally. It's the first ever parallel system that exists globally, in addition to having a head start on the collapse of empire. So I think that it's a pretty exciting time to be a Bitcoiner. It's a pretty exciting time to be somebody that's trying to opt out of the existing system, because this might be humanity's first time to fully opt out of centralized authority for good.
We're good. I thought I lost everything. You guys still hear me all right?
Yep.
All right, cool. My whole screen just like went black and then came back on. So I think we're good. But no, everything you just said was super interesting. It actually reminds me of reading Tristan's book for the first time, because he talks about that sort of the lifespan of a fiat currency and sort of thing like that. And so it's super fascinating. And actually, it made me think of a video I saw one time on TikTok, believe it or not, where it was talking about someone was, I think it was a historian looking at the fall of the Roman Empire. And that obviously there's that meme of like, do you think about the Roman Empire? But he was talking about how in his mind, the Roman Empire didn't really fall. It turned into the Roman Catholic Church. And so it's sort of like the story you're telling about, we're in this crux of an evolution, and we have these avenues that we can take. And with Bitcoin being sort of a base that's been built over the last, like you said, 15 years, there's this golden opportunity to make it something more than maybe otherwise it could be. How do you see that? I mean, it's impossible to know the future for sure, but I would love to dive into these sort of like signs that you were talking about, sort of the perfect storm, because I find that concept really interesting. How do you see that evolving over the next like 5-10 years? Because we know there's going to be this massive, I mean, there already is massive pushback on a centralized basis. How do you see this unfolding? I try to be positive as well, but I'm sort of the same mindset as you. Is like, I look at it in a pessimistic situation, but with a positive outcome.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny you brought up that how the Roman Empire collapsed and then essentially evolved into the Holy Roman Empire, which was like the Catholic Church. We touch on that a little bit in the book. And so that the humanity, if you look through every generation, they call it the heartbeat of humanity. It's the systolic and what are those two words of the in and out of the heartbeat? But systole and diastole. Yeah, right. Yeah. And so it's the heartbeat, and the world. And you read this across history, and historians have been identifying this for generations. They call it the heartbeat because it's oscillating between centralization and decentralization, centralization and decentralization. that's part of, I'm giving away like all of the punchline of that first chapter on the perfect storm of perfect storms. But what's unique about all of those storms that are coalescing right now in this generation is that they're the previous generation, they all oscillated towards centralization, and we're back towards an oscillation towards decentralization. And so we have runway. It's not like we're going to be fighting an uphill battle. Like society will be more decentralized for a period of time as empire breaks, as the old guard passes away and people lose power. There is a period of decentralization. It's up to us to see how long we can sustain that period of decentralization. The reason why decentralization never lasts for very long is because inherently decentralization is always very unorganized. That's the benefit of centralization. You're very organized, right? You have central players making decisions. Now they end up making bad decisions, like in Soviet Union, you try to decide how many shoes to make for everybody, and you miss by 10 million, and then everybody's walking around barefoot, right? People, they make bad decisions, but it's very well organized, I guess is what you would call it. They have positions and people that are supposed to be doing things. In decentralization, it can be very unorganized because we've never had a true market force. Market forces are very efficient at organizing people, but we've never had a decentralized form of money that allowed market forces to organize our society. I believe that's what we're going to see in this Bitcoin revolution, is that capital will be allotted to where it's supposed to go. It's going to be, we're going to find the most efficient uses of capital because we're going to have a truly decentralized market that will help make decisions for how society organizes. Now think about this, like when we go back to those, those parallel economies that developed in the past, going back to that Soviet Union example, when you have these Russians that are trying to survive because their society just collapsed, they're using all different forms of money, right? They're using cigarettes, they're using gasoline, they're using, like I said, just they're using shoes, and they're using products. They didn't have a very organized form of money. And so that's the huge benefit that we have this time, is that even though decentralization is very unorganized, we have the most organized tools in place to give decentralization a true and fair shot. And so this is a very unique time in history that we've literally never seen before. And that's why I think it's so exciting.
It's a good time to be alive, man. I mean, I would never trade anything or trade a timeline for what we have going right now, especially because we get to be a part of building that, solution, building that better alternative, building something that's worth living for in such a crucial moment. And, connecting with like-minded individuals as yourself is really inspiring. And it's just having that optimistic mindset is really important. I think even Bitcoiners, people in the health space, they can get very doom and gloom. Oh, you need to move here, or you need to do this, you need to leave America. It's all going to be fucked anyway. Might as well just, live your life. But that's, like, to me, a very weak mindset to have when we do have this unique opportunity. Yeah, things are unraveling in front of our eyes. But as you mentioned, we're building that parallel system. As it's unraveling, we're giving people a life raft. Is 99% of the population going to jump on board? Probably not. But that's okay, because we can kind of create this sovereign, society that's way stronger at the foundational level to propel the whole entire, human race to a place that it's been kind of held back from by this fiat mindset that we have. So how do you think about that in terms of, like, the percentages? Like, is this a natural balancing mechanism where, these people are just going to be left behind and set to their own devices because they're so low dopamine, they're not going to realize what we're building is, that important to hop on board? And do you think this is going to take like 40 years to kind of pan out, or is something like quick going to happen and the band-aid's going to be ripped off in, let's say, the next decade?
No, that's a great question. I mean, it's a super insightful question because, yeah, I think that's where a lot of people who are building right now, they kind of tend to lose hope because, like, man, I've been working for 10 years trying to orange pill people, and only like 10% of my people, my friends are Bitcoiners, or they're kind of decentralized living. And I would say that that's all you need. One of the things that I cite in the book is I believe it's Thomas Jefferson, when he's writing a letter after the American Revolution, and he's kind of reflecting on it. And we don't learn about this too often in history, but only about a third of the colonialists were in favor of revolution. There was a whole third that were loyal to the crown. And then there was a third that were just neutral and they didn't care. And then there was only 1/3 who were in favor of revolution. That 1/3 was enough to make the United States the most powerful nation in the history of the world, was born out of a minority of people pushing for something. And you see that all the time. Unwavering minorities of people, if they have a good idea on their side, like the Victor Hugo quote is that there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. If you have that idea on your side and you have an unwavering minority of people, chances are you're going to be successful. And that's what we have in front of us right now. It's a minority of people. I think that, yes, I think it's going to be slowly and then suddenly as this thing develops. I think it's going to be the next 10 to 15 years. You're going to see this process of hyper Bitcoinization unfold. Hyperinflation happens so flipping quick. If you go back and look at, we always talk about Weimar hyperinflation, but if you look at, I think it was like 1923, it was 800 marks to $1 was the conversion rate, which that was like pretty inflated because like the year before it was like 34 marks to $1. So then in a year it went up to 800 marks. So they had pretty significant inflation. But 1 year after that, instead of 800 marks, it was 1.4 trillion marks to $1. Like it went from 800 marks to $1 to 1.4 trillion to $1 in a year. So if you were a betting man in 1923, you'd be like, yeah, the Weimar or the German mark is inflating pretty badly, but there's no way it's going to be 1 million marks to $1 or 1 billion marks to $1. Or you'd be crazy to say it's going to be 1 trillion marks to $1. You would have sounded crazy, but it happened in the course of a year. It happens very, very quick. You see that with the Hungarian hyperinflation. So I think it's in the next 10 years, 100% of taxpayer revenue will go towards servicing the national debt. I don't know how you remedy that. To me, that seems like the absolute death knell of fiat currency or of the US dollar, is when everybody realizes that the only thing our tax dollars are going towards is servicing debt. Like that's obviously, to me, the end of the system. That happens in about 10 years. So when I say it's going to happen in 10 to 15 years, I think hyper Bitcoinization, I think it's going to ramp up over that time. I think Bitcoin's going to see substantial buying power through the course of that time, but you're going to see, I think, it fully mature and come to fruition in probably the next decade and a half.
What do you think needs to happen in that time period for Bitcoin adoption to really accelerate, maybe from the UI UX perspective, maybe from mining? Like, what are your key areas for Bitcoin that like drastically need to improve over the next decade to make that like a smooth transition?
I honestly think it's just a willingness for merchants to accept it. I think it's as simple as that. If merchants accept Bitcoin, then that's checkmate in this whole thing. That's a difficult proposition because who wants to be first? We have merchants that accept Bitcoin, but to me, that's like the big move.
Do you think that's a merchant problem or a customer problem? Because this is something I go back and forth with. In Wyoming, I was in El Salvador and I see all the circular economy. I think it's good, but I'm like, if I bring a bunch of Bitcoin POSs to Wyoming and they accept it, is anything going to happen? And I paid for the gym here in Santa Teresa just now with Bitcoin with Paul Keating. And he was like, yeah, the only people who really pay are like me and my friends. So do you think it's a consumer or a merchant problem or both? Because I kind of go back and forth and yeah, I'm not really sure.
So we talk about in the book, when I say we, it's because I have two co-authors. I was actually really fortunate to have Knut Svanholm wrote a chapter of the book, and then Daniel Prince wrote a chapter of the book as well. Which, I mean, those guys are amazing. Like, definitely had some star power added to the mix. But we discuss hodl versus spend culture in Bitcoin, and I think that the philosophy behind that needs to change. Yeah, I think that we need to get into more of a spending Bitcoin mindset. Now, there's a lot of nuance to that, right? Because I'm not advocating for not saving money. I think the money that you save should be in Bitcoin. I'm just saying that the money you spend should be in Bitcoin as well. And how do you do that? I think that yes, I think you're right, Tristan. I think, well, kind of what you were indicating is it's a consumer problem. My businesses accept Bitcoin. We rarely get Bitcoin payments. It's very infrequent. And so, yes, I think that it comes down to people wanting to pay in Bitcoin. I mean, I went to Bitcoin Miami last year. And I'd say probably half the people there paid in Bitcoin, but of the half of the people that paid in Bitcoin, I probably had to show half of those people how to download a Lightning wallet, and they used like Lightning for the first time ever. This was at a Bitcoin conference. People, like a quarter of the people that were buying the book, or actually, sorry, 3/4 of the people buying the book had never used Lightning before. Half of them weren't even willing to try it. At least a quarter of them were willing to try it. So I think that there's this big idea that as Bitcoiners, we shouldn't spend our Bitcoin. But it's like, what did Satoshi title the white paper? Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. It's not Bitcoin, a hodl and save technology. It's not number go up technology. Those are all great byproducts of sound money. I think that my family's wealth, my kids' wealth is going to be transformed by the fact that we save in Bitcoin. My kids already save in Bitcoin, but at the same time, I I buy Bitcoin all the time just to go out and spend it with Bitcoin merchants and try to buy things online. I search for ways to do it, and I think there's more people like me that are doing that, or like you said, you paid for the gym there. I think there's more people that are trying to do that, but it's just an idea that needs to change, right? And so I think that I hope that that's what this book represents, is an encouragement for people to kind of get on that. I'm going to spend my Bitcoin. The last chapter of the book is called Every Day is Election Day. And so the premise there is just this idea that you may or might not think your elections count, right? You might say, oh, well, I'm only 1 in 300 million people, so my one vote doesn't really matter, or the election's rigged, or whatever. Like, people have all sorts of different thoughts about elections. Well, think about this. An economic vote is far more valuable than a political vote. Now, I do think people should go and vote. I think that it sends a message or whatever. I think we should go vote. But I think that the votes that we do with our dollars or our sats are far more valuable. So let me give you an example. In a political vote, it's a zero-sum game. If one politician gets 51 million votes and the other politician gets 49 million votes, the guy who got 51 million votes, even though 49 million people voted against him, he gets 100% of the power, right? He gets all of it. But in an economic vote, look at Bud Light. Say they did $100 million in sales the year before, but then they come out with this trans person on a can, and all of a sudden, instead of $100 million, they do $51 million in sales. Those $49 million of no votes that they got are impacting their bottom line. They're absolutely, even though they still got the majority of dollars that they got before, that $49 million that they're not getting today is affecting what they're going to do as a company, right? And so economic votes are more powerful. And so that's the encouragement of the book is, are we thinking about how we're using our dollars or our sats to encourage and maybe vote for a better society? And I think that that's how we need to think about our sats rather than just stacking them. I love to stack sats, but I think that there needs to be a conversation around spending sats as well.
No, that was all such really good points. That actually made me think about when you were talking about sort of the political power versus economic power, and sort of like I have conversations like this with my brother all the time. He was a poli-sci major, so do with that what you will. But it's fascinating because it's like voting with your dollar has so much more ramification for you, for your community, than maybe the vote for. It's a very interesting idea, and I think a lot of people, regardless of your knowledge base around what we're talking about, could get on board with that because it just makes sense. Like, we talk about me and my brother a lot about how it's like you said, small numbers can make large changes. I mean, if you think about it, think about the polarized sides, like in a political community, like whether it's like Antifa or whatever on the right, can't remember the name, but it's like the smaller amounts of people when mostly the majority are somewhere in between there, right? But those guys are making the loudest bits of noise, and that's what creates movement, is like the people that are willing to take action on something. And so I think that's a really powerful statement. It only takes a few to get things going. So I guess it's sort of about tapping into the minds of the people that are already curious about it, because it's interesting. The only way I've ever viewed Bitcoin up until maybe a year and a half ago was, this is like an investment. Like, I looked at it literally as a second retirement investment. because everyone I had ever spoken to about crypto or Bitcoin, they kind of lumped it into the same thing, which is obviously not fair. But they looked at it in the views of USD. So they looked at it as like, I have a Bitcoin, but that's really whatever, $57,000 or whatever it was at the time of this conversation, when really we should be looking at it as its own asset. And the more we view it that way, the more realistic I think creating that circular economy or parallel economy becomes. And I think it just, like you said, it just takes time, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out over the next couple of years, because I had that exact same thought you did. I know I'm rambling, but about the national debt being this huge issue, because it's something that's like, how long can it truly be ignored? And when you look at it on its face, how much of the world around us is truly built on stilts of artificial idealism? And that's what I think fiat is. And when we look at the inflation numbers change month to month, we see the Fed pump money in here and then click delete the next month to change the inflation rates. You realize that the whole world around you that you've grown up in is this artificial environment. And this is where it comes back to health too, that everything's reactive, where this seems to be proactive. I think that's the mindset shift you're talking about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's precisely what you guys are talking about. I think it's precisely why people woke up during COVID. I was looking the other day at Google Trends. I've never personally Googled the word parallel system before, but if you look at like the Google Trends for the last 10 years for parallel system, there's no search, there's no trends until 2020. And then in 2020, you see it go off the charts. All of a sudden, people were like, wow, I didn't realize what the state could make me do, what my employers could make me do, what having all of getting my poultry from big ag. I didn't realize that if they kill off all their chickens, that my poultry price is going to go up 5x, or I'm just not going to have access to poultry because I'm getting it from one source or whatever. I mean, so people, the realization of a need for an alternative is there. And yeah, I think that the public consciousness is higher than ever on this thing. And I think that's the other thing we have before us. Even though it's a minority of people that are taking action, there's a public consciousness of people, of a lot more of society. And so I think that the field is ripe, the harvest is ready for us to turn this from a minority thing into a majority thing. I think that if the parallel system's robust enough, that people will just gravitate over towards it. Like my mom, she's an internet user now, but she would have never defined herself, and today still wouldn't define herself as an internet user. She watches Netflix or whatever, she does. She sends emails all the time because it's just part of the substrate of the way her world operates. I think Bitcoin's going to do the exact same thing. People are going to be operating in the quote unquote parallel Bitcoin economy, and not even necessarily realize that they're interacting with Bitcoin or Bitcoiners. It's just going to be the way that things work, because I think enough of society will see the value in that coming up here pretty soon.
Yeah. And I mean, that ties into what you're doing with the Orange Pill app, is like trying to lead that conversion of people or awareness of people to this alternative society, or at least to Bitcoin. How do you think this accelerates, right? Because I mean, I run Bitcoin meetups in Wyoming, hosting a conference. Like it's fucking hard, to get people on board. Like conversion rate is orange pilling is terrible. I mean, if you want to just be honest, like it's really hard. But I think that's good. But we need to increase it somehow. And I think it's almost out of our control, but we can have these resources to make it a little bit easier for like meetups and conferences and, questions, merchants, like where they go to find Bitcoin, accepting merchants. But to me, it's like you can only find this when you're ready for it. You shouldn't even really like, oh, I'm into Bitcoin now because my friend told me, that's like trust, no verification, antithesis of Bitcoin. So how do you think about this kind of accelerating? I think the next year or two, it'll probably happen a lot just because of the price and the ETF, but I'm curious to get your take.
Yeah. I think, that's exactly what we're trying to do with Orange Pill app. The whole purpose of Orange Pill app, it's not to be a competitor with Twitter or Nostr. It's really kind of a sister product to Nostr. Nostr is a decentralized protocol for communication online. Orange Pill app is we're a company, but our whole purpose is to facilitate in real life connections. Like we people can chat through the app and all that kind of stuff, but really the point there is just to get to know people enough to where you feel comfortable like meeting up with them, whether you're going to a meetup or I've met probably 12 or 13 people now through the app that I've just gone out and got lunch with and got coffee with, and now they're like buddies of mine because they're people in my local area. And so building out your local community of Bitcoiners, of real life Bitcoiners, not just people you kind of know online, I think is really important. One of the other things we cover in the book is that I think the next epoch of humanity, meaning like the next like 4 to 5 years plus, is going to be defined as trying to decipher between what's real and what's artificial, right? Like we deal enough with that in our food, but right now, like it's very clear that I'm talking to two other human beings, but in the not too distant future, like it's very possible that you guys could be AI deep fakes that are tricking me to thinking that you guys have a show that, you want to talk about Bitcoin. And it's just like, it's all AI generated. And, anybody that DMs you on Twitter could be a bot, or even Nostr could be a bot, or whatever. Like these different mediums of communication could be not real people. And so having more real life connections, like Tristan, facilitating meetups, is probably one of the most important things that we can do. Because you think about it from like a distraction perspective. If I wanted to disrupt the parallel system, I would probably try to distract Bitcoiners with meaningless relationships online, right? I would inundate Bitcoiners with conversations that were just with bots, right? So that they wouldn't be actually connecting with other people in real life and things like that. And so, yes, I think that that's what we're trying to build at Orange Pill app is in-person connection. But then also we just launched our merchant section. So that was one of the big reasons why I came on, was so that you can find local merchants. We just started it. We have, a few dozen merchants that have signed up. So it's not huge or not robust by any stretch. But we're working every day and more merchants are coming online. And I think that as the tools are built, and as that becomes, the user experience on that becomes a little bit more smooth, with people recognizing that, oh, I can just log into an app, and if I want to go get a massage today, and I can just look up like the local masseuse or the local chiropractor or whatever that accepts Bitcoin, that becomes part of the way we operate. That's not how my brain works right now. Like if I want to spend Bitcoin, I really default to, do I know anybody that accepts Bitcoin for what I want right now? And I kind of go off of this like knowledge bank that I have in my head. Now, if I want to spend fiat, I'll Google or I'll DuckDuckGo or whatever. I'll just look up like local businesses that way. I know I have resources to find fiat businesses if I want to spend my fiat that day. But I don't think we've programmed in our mind is, how do I essentially do the equivalent of Googling a Bitcoin business? And so as we realize that these tools are reliable and that we can, I'm hungry and I want lunch, where's a Bitcoin business that serves food when I'm out and about? Okay, I can go to that business. Recognizing that that's in the app is going to be a kind of a retraining. I think that there's a learning curve for people to operate, upgrading their own personal operating system to do that is a bit of a challenge. But I think that this next bull run you kind of talked about, the next year or 2 years, probably, this bull run that's going to happen. I remember when this is probably my third bull market now. In my first bull market, all my buddies that got into Bitcoin, they probably bought in at like $1,200 or something like that. The guys that I first orange pilled, none of them really cared to go and like grab a beer and talk about Bitcoin until Bitcoin was like 15 grand. So it was in that 2016, 2017 era when they were buying Bitcoin. And so even though it had doubled in price, they didn't want to go out and grab a beer. When it had tripled in price or quadrupled in price, they didn't want to go out and buy a beer. But when it was getting up to 10x, 20x their initial investment, that was when they're like, I just want to talk about Bitcoin. And so I think that euphoria stage will be a huge time. Like I said, the field, the harvest is ready. That FOMO that comes along, that euphoria that comes along with Bitcoin being kind of inflated in price, will be a huge opportunity for those who are building in Bitcoin to pump your meetups, to get people to go out and have those in real life connections. I think it'll be easy to fill your meetups at that point because people will be seeking it out. And now, again, one of the things that we didn't have in previous bull runs was tools like Orange Pill app that make it easy for you to find those meetups, to find those Bitcoiners in real life and things like that. So we think that the presence of tools that have been built over the last 4 years is going to allow us to capture more Bitcoiners and retain more Bitcoiners in that Bitcoin social layer.
Yeah, I mean, it's brilliant. I think there's still not a best practice for like onboarding new merchants. That's still like a work in progress. You know, Zaproy, BTC Pay. There's a lot going on. I think later this year, the combination of those tools maturing plus the price action is going to make like 2025 the year that like we need to just go gung ho and like get hundreds of merchants onboarded in like, you know, your local community area state, because then it just accelerates from there, I think. And yeah, I love what you guys are doing at the Orange Pill app. And maybe the last quick question here is, you know, how we talk about how the Bitcoin parallel society, everything, how do you see that happening from the health system perspective? Because to me, it's almost way more challenging because we are so entrenched in like centralized health. And we don't really, yeah, we have a good alternative as in like, hey, go outside, get your health and all this stuff. But if something happens, like you're still going to go probably to the centralized system. So what do you see as like the progression there in a couple decades? Like, is there this just decentralized life and when you need to use a centralized system, or do you think we're going to have this decentralized healthcare platform built out? It just kind of hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I think that there's more doctors that are beginning to stand by their convictions and realize that half of their medical school was devoted towards pulling the rug over their eyes, you know, or pulling the wool over their eyes. I see a lot of doctors that are opting out of working for Kaiser Permanente or something like that and opening their own practice. I think that that's happening. And so what we need to do is we need to patronize those doctors, right? If they're good qualified doctors, it's also possible that they opted out of the old system and they still suck as the doctor. Like that's very possible. But if they're a good doctor, if there's somebody that is, you know, opening their own practice and they're providing decentralized health, then go and seek those people out. Maybe it's a little bit more uncomfortable because you're used to opting into this really organized, well polished machine, and their private office is not that. But as long as they're giving you quality medical care, then I think that those are the types of people that we should be seeking out, especially if they're practicing good, healthy medicine in the sense that it's supposed to be practiced. Again, we need to reward them economically because I mean, going back to that idea of is it people spending Bitcoin? Is it a merchant's problem or the consumer problem? I think it all comes back to the consumer. Think about this future, and I think that this is, I mean, every Bitcoiner probably agrees on this. 5 years from now, are people that deal only in fiat going to are merchants going to be like, yes, I want more fiat customers or I want more Bitcoin customers? Like the value proposition of Bitcoiners having more spending power, like Bitcoiners are going to be seen as the rich people of society. They kind of already are viewed as that, but that thesis is just going to become stronger and stronger. So I think there will be a world in the not too distant future when merchants, when they're going to tailor their advertising to try and get Bitcoiners to patronize their business, right? Because Bitcoiners will be the ones that have the best spending power. And so if Bitcoiners are patronizing doctors who are opting out of the old system, the best, wealthiest, most free doctors on the planet are going to be those who are primarily, their customer base is primarily Bitcoiners. And so, yes, reward these people economically by giving them your business. That's the only way that we can win this thing. We can shout it from the mountaintops that we need to do it, but unless we actually go do it, it's just not going to happen.
No, I couldn't agree more. And actually, I agree with everything you said, especially from the consumer side. And it's the same with medicine. Like if you have a health story like me or Tristan or whoever have, you'll know you did 99.9% of all the heavy lifting along that journey, whether that was advocating for yourself in a centralized system or looking and researching outside of that. Like that was you, man. Like you did all that stuff. And so the systemic change is going to come from that base. Like I think it's the same in the medical world. It's like gonna be this patient-led sort of endeavor, but like you said, incentivize it. And I think that's a great way to sort of put a cap on it in a sense, and it'll be a fun ride. I'm very excited for it. So where can people find you, reach out to you, all the stuff you want to drop, and your new book dropping Saturday? Super exciting, great timing.
Dude, this is
I'll
great.
let you sort of take us out here.
Yeah. So you can, if anybody wants to pay in sats, which we just talked about, not as many people do. I found that a lot of people on Orange Pill app are willing to transact in sats, which is pretty cool. And the app has Lightning Wallet integration. We don't have our own Lightning Wallet, but you can plug your Lightning Wallet address into the app. And so as easy as you send a message, you can send a zap. And you can send somebody sats or pay in sats. So if anybody wants to buy the book in sats as of Saturday, please feel free to reach out to me through Orange Pill app. I'd be happy to sell copies of the book for Bitcoin through the app. If you want to go through Amazon, which is obviously a very efficient system because it's a big centralized system. The pre-sale is going live right now, so you can pre-order the ebook. There's a 1 million sat seed wallet or seed phrase in the book, and so if you guys pre-order the ebook, you get to be the first ones to start hunting for that seed phrase. So 1 million sats is hidden in the book. It's also hidden in the physical copies, but obviously if you order the physical copies on Saturday, it's going to be 2 or 3 days before you can start to hunt for that seed phrase. But I think that this book represents the first book that I'm aware of, at least in the third wave of Bitcoin books. I think that a lot of the Bitcoin books that come out now are going to be the what now kind of Bitcoin books. So I would say that the first generation were all the pre-Bitcoin books. It's the Von Mises, the Rothbards, the the sovereign individual type books. Those ideas that kind of helped foster the ideas before Bitcoin. And then you had the Bitcoin Standard. You had Broken Money. Those types of books that were in the let's help understand Bitcoin now. That was like the second generation. And those are going to be relevant for a really long time because we still have millions and millions or billions of people to Orange Pill. So Beef and Bitcoin, Bitcoin Evangelism, all these books are going to be very relevant for a long time. But I think we're starting to see the emergence of the third generation of Bitcoin books. I've talked to some other authors as well who are coming out with other books, not on the parallel system, but other books that I would say that are like third generation Bitcoin books, because it's okay, I've been in Bitcoin for 2 years, or I've been in Bitcoin for 10 years. I've stacked sats. Now what? Like, what's the mission beyond this? And so it's what you guys talk about. It's about encouraging the decentralized economy, encouraging decentralized living, encouraging decentralized thinking. So it's not just about orange pilling people and helping wake people up. It's here's the commission, here's the call. And so that's what Parallel represents. It's a book of action. It's a book that hopefully you walk away from and say like, okay, the next generation of humanity is going to be shaped by the decisions that we make right now. Are you willing to take that mission on? You're the hero of the journey, man. Like if you take this mission on, you are heroic. You're going down a heroic endeavor that history will reflect fondly of, because history always talks about the winners, and I believe Bitcoiners will be the winners. And so, yeah, man, I think that this book is hopefully going to kick off a little bit of that excitement around this idea of we can build something better.
Well, that's awesome. I really look forward to it. Thanks, guys, for listening, and we'll see you again in another episode of Decentralized Radio.